If I was 15 years old right now and I walked into a Guitar Center, or more accurately went online to Sweetwater and said, I want to heavy metal guitar, send me a guitar, an amp, and pedals to play heavy metal music, the gear that they would send me and the sound that I would get, the result would not sound like Tony Iommi on this record. I've avoided making this video for years, pretty much since the start of the channel, but the more that I listen, the more records I get, the more I indulge, the more I am convinced that Black Sabbath with Ozzy is not a heavy metal band.
Come on now!
Before the pitchforks come out, before the comments start to fly,
Won't you listen?
this is just my opinion. I hold no weight with anyone. So me thinking this is not going to end the world in any way. Also, this is really just a tongue-in-cheek thing for me as a drummer to point out how insanely groovy and sometimes even downright funky Black Sabbath and Bill Ward are specifically. And how they span a lot of other styles, as we're gonna see. And really, if you were just woken up out of a coma,
The guy is unconscious in a coma, and you don't have the guts to kiss his girlfriend.
or you were unexposed and people gave you a bunch of music to listen to, I don't think that you would put Black Sabbath in the same section of the record shop as, say, Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax, Pantera, or Sepultura. Also, I just got the brand new Black Sabbath Paranoid Rhino Audio High Fidelity version, and I recently had the Vinyl Me Please edition that was put out also by Kevin Gray. And we'll do a little bit of a comparison with these, but I don't have any original copies. I've never owned any Vertigo Swirls or anything like that. I've never even had like any of the Neems editions, which I hear are actually very good as well, made from like the same metal as the original UK Swirls. But these are all I have. So if you want really good comparisons of other versions of Paranoid, go check out some videos elsewhere. Also, I just learned that in Logic Pro 11, you can literally take any song and hit stem splitter and split the song into tracks, allowing you to hear and mess with individual tracks.
Oh yeah!
And we're gonna actually use that for some examples in this video. And this could lead to more videos like this since YouTube doesn't flag the drum and bass tracks individually, and I can actually talk about, the real music and give some real examples. And I'm a drummer and love bass anyway, so that's primarily what I listen to. Please comment and tell me that I'm wrong. Do it a lot. Tell your friends and make them comment and tell me that I'm wrong, and maybe consider my face the subscribe button and just beat the crap out of it and subscribe to this channel.
Try it out!
Seriously, I'm a guy with an opinion and I will attempt to back it up even if you disagree, but you might find something on this channel worthwhile, so enjoy this little rant and check out some other videos on here while you're here.
I love you!
Okay, so let's have some fun here. Hear me out on this. Black Sabbath is one of my favorite bands of all time, and as I get older and older, I like them more and more, and Black Sabbath, in my opinion, gave birth to heavy metal. And all the things that came after them are heavy metal, including later iterations of themselves. I consider them, with Dio and all iterations after Never Say Die, for them to be a full-on heavy metal band. But the original band that started out as Polka Talkin' Earth or whatever they were called, the original 4 members with Ozzy, are not a heavy metal band. And one of their most not heavy metal albums is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which has this cover and would certainly make you think that they are a devil worshipping metal band. But when they recorded these albums, heavy metal was not a thing, and they were not going into the studio with the same mindset that Metallica did when they were a metal band. See what I just did there? Ha! I also think that this lean into the metal persona, especially by Ozzy, is why a lot of people call them a heavy metal band. But even they didn't consider themselves that, at least not back in the 1970s. Tony Iommi quoted, "We called it heavy rock." The term heavy metal came out from a journalist when I came back from America in the 70s. He said, "You're playing heavy metal." And I said, "No, it's heavy rock. What's that?" As in, what is heavy metal? But hang with me on this. I mean, there's a point to all of what I'm talking about here. I'm a huge fan of Black Sabbath, but I'm also a drummer and I love funk and groove music, and I just cannot help but realize how funky Black Sabbath is sometimes if you actually go and analyze this. And jazzy too. Like, really, really much so. But I can't stress this enough. This is meant to be fun and explore some more connections of music with Black Sabbath. I also love heavy metal music, and I grew up first in punk bands and trying to be speed metal bands and things like that. And that's right away where things get very hairy in the world or the genre of heavy metal. There are tons of sub-genres out there. There's thrash metal and speed metal and death metal and black metal and doom metal, even stuff like hardcore punk or whatnot. But I understand also that there are nuances like that with jazz. You have bebop, post-bop, hard bop, modal, free, fusion, soul jazz, jazz funk, all these different things. Now, when I was younger and I was in those punk and rock bands, if you had told me at the time that Black Sabbath wasn't heavy metal, I would have laughed in your face, much like you're probably doing to me right now. But, and this is not to say that you're not an experienced musician, but as I became more exposed to more music and I got into more stuff as a drummer, I began to make a lot of connections. I remember realizing the first time how funky of a band Led Zeppelin was with listening to the Lemon Song, and I had never had the chance to see a lot of these bands live. So hearing them jam out or do things a little different than the album or than their persona wasn't something that I was always exposed to. So to me, back then, Black Sabbath was a heavy metal band. But as I got more into jazz and funk and other genres, and more specifically when you start to play that music, coming from what I was playing, punk and metal bands, either with fast tempos or odd time signatures or super heavy drum fills or double bass drums, all things that people consider metal drumming, none of that is in Black Sabbath. Let's say real quick that I wanted to try out for a heavy metal band and they were like, hey, play us one of your favorite metal beats, and I played this. Or this one. Or this one. They would probably all be like, dude, that is not heavy metal. Those are all Black Sabbath drum beats. Wicked World, Wasp, Sweet Leaf, Supernaut, which is one of the heaviest metalist songs there is. In fact, apparently Supernaut was one of John Bonham's favorite Black Sabbath tunes, and I believe that's because of the funky Latin percussion breakdown that happens in the middle of it. Now, did you hear what I just said right there? Many people consider Volume 4 to be one of the most definitive metal albums of all time, and Supernaut specifically to be the defining song of that album, and yet it has a Latin percussion breakdown in the middle of it, and a very good one too. Now, if I'm in your metal band and we're writing a song and I suggested putting in a Latin percussion breakdown, we probably would end up in one of those classic band fights, and as you rain blows down upon me for my suggestion, and you're wearing a Black Sabbath shirt, not realizing the folly of your ways, unless of course we were in Sepultura or something like that, then Latin percussion breaks all day, right? I've seen Lars Ulrich from Metallica prepare for a show. I don't think that Bill Ward needed to tape up his fingers and come off the stage losing 30 pounds of water weight and looking like he just ran a marathon. None of Black Sabbath songs are past 160 beats per minute, maybe not even 120 beats per minute, which is what most marching bands march at in parades. And to this point, I've mostly just been talking from the percussion standpoint and pointing out how Bill Ward is one of the grooviest drummers out there. However, if I was 15 years old right now and I walked into a Guitar Center, or more accurately went online to Sweetwater and said, I want to heavy metal guitar, send me a guitar, an amp, and pedals to play heavy metal music, the gear that they would send me and the sound that I would get, the result would not sound like Tony Iommi on this record. And if you wanted to sound like him, you would need completely different gear than the gear that they would be giving you. The sound of the guitar on these early Sabbath albums, while it has a dark tone and a growl to it, it's not the sound that 99% of people even want for their heavy metal band anymore. That chug, 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 chug sound is what most people are going for, and they want heavier and heavier. Tony Iommi, I can't say this for a fact, but I'm 99% sure when he walked into the studio to record this record or any of the earlier songs in these days, did they ever say that I want to sound heavier. Kids today, if they get into heavy metal and they get out there with a new guitar and amp, they will struggle to recreate the sound of Tony Iommi on this record because the newer stuff out there does not sound like a vintage amp. And a lot of what I'm talking about here comes from two places for me, and one of them is Rick Rubin, who is a pretty well-known producer out there, and he produced 13, which is the band's last album with Ozzy. And that was supposed to be a full-on reunion, and then they totally shafted Bill Ward, but that's a whole other story. Rick Rubin, I heard an interview with him and the entire band on Howard Stern back when they were promoting that album. And he started talking about wanting to make that album with them, and that he wanted to make an album that sounded like this album.
Did it make sense to you?
It did eventually, yeah. Not at the time, because he said, forget heavy metal, this album isn't heavy metal, so this was before heavy metal. So listen to what you used to play before metal.
And Ozzy, did you think Rick was insane?
I didn't know what he was getting at. I mean, we've all done like 500 albums since the first one.
I mean, it's sort of ballsy of him to say, I want you to sit there and listen.
I didn't understand what he was getting at, but we originally were a jazz blues band.
Right.
And we started writing along the way, but we still had our blues roots, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what he was getting at, the feel of it.
So you admire what he did?
Yeah.
We can all agree that Black Sabbath in 2012 did not sound like Black Sabbath from 1970. And Ozzy is obviously a big part of that, but the idea of being a heavy metal band wasn't a thing. And Geezer Butler has actually come out in interviews and blasted Rick Rubin for asking the band to kind of do these things and use older equipment and even forget that they're a heavy metal band. He blew it off as nonsense. But to create an album like this record, you have to do what they did and be where they were. You have to put yourself in that state and also use that equipment, which will really help dial in this sound. Why do filmmakers still use film? Why does Quentin Tarantino still shoot on film and even try to get his, movies released on film sometimes? Because he has a style and a look that he's going for that digital just does not create. Now, the second place that this comes from for me is I am a huge, huge fan of Daptone Records, as you know if you watch this channel at all. They are an all-analog 60s soul, funk, reggae, garage rock inspired new record label that started in 2002. They put out 45 singles and LPs in the year 2025, and they've done so for years, and they pride themselves on getting the sound of Motown and Stax. But they are keenly aware to get that sound, you can't use a $5,000 Paul Reed Smith guitar. To get that authentic sound, you can't record digitally to Pro Tools or individually track the horn players. They need to be standing together in a room together. We're trying to get the sound of the 60s. And in the 60s, they didn't use a $3,000 DW drum set with maple shells. They used a knockoff Chinese drum set that they found at a pawn shop, and they used one mic because that's all that they had. In this video here, Bill Ward is on a 1960s Ludwig kit, and these kits are not anything like the ones that they make today. And he's using coated drum heads. Coated drum heads have a very specific sound to it. There was something that I didn't learn until much later on. When you're listening to the drum fills on Iron Man in this record, the sound of those toms is coming from coated Ludwig toms. You cannot get that sound with clear dot heads. You cannot get that sound with a clear ring head. You cannot get that sound from even 2-ply clear heads at all. These are all the things that would be suggested to you if you were a modern drummer walking into a drum store today and trying to play heavy metal music. You're like, I want to have that deep, tom sound. I want to have that thick, heavy metal tom sound. It's not on this record. That heavy metal tom sound is not on this record. And you can even equate this to Motown or to R&B stuff nowadays with like the slick drums and the super compressed 5-string bass sound. It's not the raw soul sound of the 60s. It's a completely different thing at this point.
And a taste of honey's worse than none at all. If you got one whole hour.
Rick Rubin was on to something. As much as he is a complete weirdo, he knew that Black Sabbath was not a heavy metal band yet in 1970 when they made this record. That the sound of Paranoid is pre-metal. The sound of jazz, blues, Latin percussion, Spanish guitar work, kind of in that order. All influences that these guys were listening to at the time. Maybe a better attempt for Rick Rubin to get Geezer Butler on board might have been, hey man, stop listening to any new rock or metal music and only listen to 1968 music, mainly jazz, which is what you were listening to when you made this record, to get influenced again by it and to try and recreate the sound of these early records when you were a jazz bassist. Now, I say all of this in celebration of these new Rhino High Fidelity series records, and I didn't want to just come on here and say that you should get this because as of right now, unless you pay ridiculous prices for it, which you should not, you cannot get this because it's sold out because these are limited to 5,000 in a numbered edition. However, with the first version that they did, the Black Sabbath self-titled, and a lot of the other Rhino High Fidelity records, including like the Doors and stuff, they come out with them in limited numbered editions, and then later on they come out with them in unnumbered editions, the exact same jackets, the exact same vinyl, the exact same extras, everything's the same, you just don't get a number. So for us that are super crazy fans about this kind of stuff, like I love these things and I love having a numbered edition. So I immediately went out. And again, this is just to show you how much of a fan that I am of Black Sabbath. I'm not just coming on here to hate on them and say, oh, they're not this. In fact, I'm not hating at all. I'm saying they created heavy metal music. They were not a heavy metal band when they made this record, but they created heavy metal music.
I invented the piano key necktie! I invented it!
Let's talk a little bit about this pressing here. This is pressed by Kevin Gray, AAA lacquer from the original master tapes, and they're using the American master tapes instead of the UK master tapes. Again, I've never even heard a UK, version like live in person, so I don't even know what those sound like. The only things I've ever heard are the greenies, which have been more representative of what these are. But this is a beautiful, beautiful gatefold jacket. It's like a stout and thick gatefold, just like all the other Rhino High Fidelity series. And just like all the other Rhino High Fidelity series, you need a 13-inch sleeve to be able to sleeve these properly, or else you will never get them in a regular 12.75 millimeter sleeve. It's just kind of a pain in the butt, but it is what it is. You do get an awesome small booklet that comes with this as well that shows the original master tapes. And I gotta say, ever since the David Bowie thing that I did where we were, actually dealing with the original master tapes, I have come with a new appreciation with like kind of seeing what they call like, the tape porn, I guess. But I love it, man. I love the pictures of these tapes. It really does give you a very good idea of exactly what these things look like in the 70s when they were recording them. And it gets you very close to the original, which is what an audiophile record is trying to do anyway. It's trying to get, as close back to the original as we can. What I find very interesting, and one of the other reasons I wanted to get it and kind of make this video too, is because this is a Kevin Gray pressing from Rhino Records of Black Sabbath Paranoid. And this is also a Kevin Gray pressing from Rhino Records of Black Sabbath Paranoid. Now, This is a reissue that was done in, I believe, 2013 or 2014 that was reissued by Vinyl Me Please. And they put it out on this purple swirl vinyl. And they said at the time that these are made from the same metal and the same, cutting and lacquer that was done from the 2004 or 2006. And that's the other thing too. I can't get a definitive if it's either 2004 or 2006. I'm pretty sure it was 2004 when Rhino did a version of this record that was just a black version, AAA master from Kevin Gray from the original master tapes. As you can see here, they both come with OB strips. This one is the super old style OB strip that came with Vinyl Me Please in like their earliest edition days. So it says right here that the edition was from November of 2015, and it even has packaged and signed here. So that's kind of cool that they did that back in the day. But so this is still a Rhino edition, but it was put out by Vinyl Me Please for this purple copy. And the vinyl itself has the original Warner Brothers Greenie logo on the VMP version. I'm pretty sure that was the same on the black Rhino edition. And this new edition has the new Rhino High Fidelity labels. Now these Rhino High Fidelity labels now have like Black Sabbath font on them. So it's a little bit different than the older ones that they're doing. So they're still kind of like refining this series. I'm not sure. I think the Doors might have had the Doors font as well on their label. In terms of how these two sound, it's very interesting because they're both cut by Kevin Gray. So you would almost think like, I wanted to see if, we were just kind of being duped a little bit with this one, if we were just getting, a reversion of this in this. But I can definitely say that that is 100% not the case at all. This is definitely a better cut. However, there are some things about this that are still really nice. So if you had this and you didn't want to go out and get another version of this record, I don't think you would have to go out and buy this. But if you're a super huge fan of Black Sabbath, you're probably going to want to go out and get this anyway. I will say this, the bass and the drum sound overall on this record, on this version, on the new version, definitely best the Vinyl Me Please version. That might not be as true to an original sound. I feel like there's a lot of like low end on the bass guitar on this that's not on this, but when I listen to this, I don't necessarily miss it. Like this has that really good growly mid-range bass sound. And the drums have that, like we talked about with those coated drums, it has that like flat, dull tom sound to it. Whereas this has this like very deep bass sound to it and a very deep bass drum sound to it. The drum solos that are on this, and especially in Rat Salad or in Fairies Wear Boots, where you have like these extended, drum portions on this. I will say, if you're a drummer, this is definitely the one you're going to want to listen to. But I wasn't losing things by not having it on this one. So again, it's tough to say. I mean, I think that you would want to go out and buy this just because if you're a Black Sabbath purist, it's just great to have this. And also, I think that there is a lot that you can hear a difference with Kevin Gray's new system. Like they keep talking about his new tube system is like so much better than his old one. So this is cut at Coherent on his new system. This was cut back in the day on his older system. So I honestly think that this one's probably definitely better the way to go. Plus, you'll probably have to pay like $60 or so to find this one. I think I paid around $40 or $50 for this one about a year and a half or 2 years ago. So I know that you still can find versions of it out there, and you can find the Black Rhino edition version also, but why bother? Just wait until this comes out without the numbered edition and just get it for $30. It'll be great. And I gotta say, I was very confused when they started coming out with the Rhino High Fidelity series and a bunch of people started asking for Black Sabbath stuff, because I was like, Rhino already did a bunch of, AAA master Black Sabbath stuff. And so why not just go and get that stuff? But I guess people don't really like these. I don't know. I think they sound really good. And we just talked about the Vinyl Me Please and the Rhino edition one that was there that was also from Kevin Gray. Some of these were done by Chris Bellman. Like I have the volume 4 as well. I have all of them because I went out and I wanted to get audiophile editions of all the Black Sabbath stuff. I didn't want to get the 2016 remasters that they did. I wanted these ones because they were cut from the original master tapes. And so I guess it's cool that we're getting these new Rhino Hi-Fi ones because they're cut on Kevin Gray's new system. The Paranoid definitely sounds better, so I can definitely say it sounds better than his older version of it, and it's cut it coherent. So hopefully we'll get all of these. I would love to hear this one or Volume 4, or I would love to hear all of them. So again, I'm not really sure why they didn't just do a box set and send all these out with a box set. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. I can definitely say one thing I really like about this version way better is Ozzy's vocals. Ozzy's vocals on this just have a lot more of a depth to it, and a lot more, you can hear a lot more of the echo and the reverb on the vocals. Another thing too, going back to the idea of them not being a heavy metal band, Planet Caravan is one of my favorite tracks on this record. In fact, it might be my favorite track on this record as I like get older and older and keep listening to this thing more and more. That track is so good. I don't know how you could be in a modern heavy metal band and try to propose that type of track to your band. And I speak a lot of this to the fact that I was in heavy metal bands. I was in a lot of bands. And one thing that always happens in a lot of bands is you get a lot of no. Right? You get a lot of, no, we shouldn't do that because that's not who we are. We're not a funk, we're a funk band. We don't play rock songs. We're a rock band. We don't play jazz stuff, whatever it is. If you were a heavy metal band and you wanted to play a song like Planet Caravan, I don't think the guys in your band would even allow it to happen, man. I think that there would be so much pushback and so much like, what, you're bringing in tabla drums? Like, what the hell do you need tabla drums for? Like, I don't think that there would be an acceptance nowadays to a drummer coming in and wanting to be the kind of drummer that Bill Ward was on this record, or, playing the kind of bass lines that Geezer Butler was on this record. There's a really cool write-up here on the inside of this record, and I noticed this because I, was reading through, and there's even some awesome quotes here. We didn't have an inkling we'd just invented a whole new genre of rock music, quoted Geezer Butler. Right? So like even there, he's pointing out that they had no idea that they were a heavy metal band at the time. And that's more about what I'm talking about here is it's not the idea that the music that they ended up creating became heavy metal or that the bands after them were heavy metal bands. It's more about the fact that when these guys in this picture sat down to play, they were not a heavy metal band. They were some jazz blues rockers who wanted to come in and try something different. And the result that they got is heavy metal. Here's another quote here. Primarily, we've always been a blues, jazz, and rock band, but I'm certainly not ashamed to be called metal. And again, that's him saying that in their mind, they didn't think of themselves as heavy metal. They don't mind being called heavy metal. And I'm not coming on here to say in this video that, it's lame that people do call them heavy metal. I just want to point out to a lot of people that Bill Ward's a super funky drummer. That's really what it all comes down to. I'm a huge fan of this stuff going all the way to Never Say Die. After Ozzy leaves the band in the 70s, I kind of get away from Black Sabbath, and I'm not that big of a Black Sabbath purist. So again, don't kill me here with the pitchforks of what I'm talking about. Like, hear out what I'm saying on this video before you comment in the comments. But then again, please do comment and also subscribe while you're there. I love this band and I love heavy metal. And I hope this comes off more as a sentiment to this band that I think that these guys are more than a metal band. And that does not diminish metal at all. Maybe what I'm also saying here is that metal has just more to offer stylistically than just chug, chug, chug guitar and being heavy. And if you want to be in a modern heavy metal band, you can still have a cool Latin percussion drum solo, right? But there are too many times where I'm listening to this band and I'm feeling the groove more than anything. Even my kids and my wife do. My wife refuses any metal in the house. So if I want to listen to like Pantera or Sepultura or anything like that, I have to play that stuff when she's out of the house. But she allows me and even loves listening to Black Sabbath. So please comment below. This guy thinks that Black Sabbath is not a metal band because his wife likes them. And I get it. I do think that they eventually evolve into what they created. And I do believe that they created heavy metal. And to me, that's more of an honor than them just being a heavy metal band. They created it.
I invented the piano key necktie! I invented it!
And again, too, the band with Dio is a metal band. In fact, Sabotage really starts to get into being a heavy metal band, and there's a lot of tracks on like Never Say Die and stuff like that that are just way more onto the metal genre, you know, like like getting right into that, like we're now full on to a chugging metal band. When Ozzy leaves the band, he goes on to have a metal band with Randy Rhoads and all the amazing stuff that they go on to do there. But it's almost like they're looking back at themselves at this point and being influenced by themselves and by being the gods of metal. And, you know, it's like all this kind of stuff.
Sabbath! Yeah! In front of you! I am honored to be in front of you! Yeah! You are the masters of heavy metal! You rule! You rule! You rule now! Yeah!
So if I've offended you with this, please let me know vigorously in the comments, and please smash that like button and subscribe button while you're there. I'm going to go listen to some Black Sabbath, and I'm going to groove out to them. And I will see you on the next one.
Yeah! Gently! Gently! Yeah! Oh God! Yes! Yeah! 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 Oh, baby!
He's louder when he leaves.
Yeah,